By Representative Steube and Representative Rehwinkel, Vasilinda, and others, House Bill 4001, a bill to be entitled "An Act Relating to Licenses to Carry a Concealed Weapon or Firearms."
Representative Steube, you're recognized to explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the campus carry legislation we discussed extensively yesterday on the House floor.
Representative Steube, having explained his bill, are there amendments on the desk?
None on the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, members, we are going into structured debate on HB 4001. Debate will be limited to 45 minutes per side in 15-minute increments. Total debate time not to exceed 90 minutes. Representative Richardson, you are recognized to begin a debate, and the clerk will start the debate clock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Williams for 3 minutes.
Representative Williams, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, every year we get an opportunity to come to this floor and do the work of the people. Every year we have an opportunity to do good work for those people. Unfortunately, with all due respect to the sponsor of this bill, understanding the intent where he's trying to go, this bill does not keep our schools and our universities safer. When you think about the need, you have to go to the source. You have to go to the folks who are asking for this legislation to be heard. So I did that. I reached out to the university presidents. I reached out to chiefs of police on our university campuses. And I will tell you that no one is clamoring for this bill that they believe will keep their campuses safe. University of West Florida, no. Florida A&M University, no. Florida State University, where one of our former colleagues is the president, no. University of North Florida, no. University of Florida, no. University of Central Florida, no. University of South Florida, no. On and on and on. FIU, FAU, our HBCUs at Edward Waters College and Bethune-Cookman and Florida Memorial, none of them have said that they want this law to be passed. So why? The professors on the campus, they feel as though if this law is passed, they will feel intimidated in the event that someone comes on campus and say it's an irate student or a disgruntled student, because let's face it, we've all had our share of bad grades. I've seen your report cards. I can tell you later on who those are. But they even said they would feel intimidated. So then I said, okay, well, let's go to the students. And when I went to some of the campuses, I said, well, do you really want this law to be passed? And the students said they felt as though they would be intimidated. They felt that their life would be more in danger with this bill, with this law. And so then I asked the final folks that I think is most important, the parents. I said, parents, are you excited about this? And the parents said, this does not make sense. And so, members, I will tell you that those are the stakeholder groups that we should be caring about on this bill. And when you think about those parents, you think about those are the ones from in-state and out-of-state who send their kids to school every year, to our universities and colleges. And if they're concerned, this could have a chilling effect on the number of students or the students that their parents will want to send their kids to our state university system. That's not what we want to do. We want to move the needle forward. We want to increase the population. And so, members, I would encourage you not to support this bill. If you want to make campuses safer, let's put more funding into the university's budget for campus police. Let's put more funding in the programs to make sure our co-eds, our college co-eds, especially the young ladies, and my daughter's about to be one. Hopefully she will choose a great Florida school. She will be one in a few years. Let's put more money there to make sure our campuses are safe. But to go in and look at this bill and to repeal the law that is already on the books does not make sense. It just does not make sense. And so I encourage you, listen to those stakeholders. Listen to those parents, those students, those professors, the police chiefs, and yes, the college presidents that said that they're standing their ground and they're saying no. No to this bill, not today, not tomorrow, not this session, not next session. Let's don't dance on this. Let's don't dance on anything. Let's don't pass this bill. Thank you.
Representative Richardson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Jay Cortez.
Representative Jay Cortez, you're recognized in the debate, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I stated yesterday, a retired correctional officer and the training that you get as a correctional officer is extensive on carrying a gun, and they discourage you from shooting a gun anywhere where there's civilians. And civilians means me and you and others around us. And you're going to have somebody who's trained by a concealed weapons permit, which I've taken to be a security guard, and the training is horrible. It's not the greatest in the world. You pay, $50, and you get trained for what, a couple of hours, 4 to 6 hours, and then you're done. I don't see this being a good bill when you have to be walking in corridors that are close together, and to me it's called close quarter combat, and you're going to be shooting your gun, and it's going to go through the walls and kill somebody who's innocent. I think this is a bad bill for carrying guns where the public is going to be involved and they can get killed by an innocent bystander, and alcohol and guns don't mix.
Representative Richardson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Stark.
Representative Stark, you're recognized in the debate.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We discussed yesterday about organizations that may or may not be supporting this type of initiative. One of the organizations I read about is an organization called the International Association of Campus Law Enforcement Administrators. And in their studies, they show that concealed carry initiatives do not make campuses safer. In fact, they feel that there's evidence to suggest that the presence of students carrying concealed weapons would actually potentially increase violence on college campuses. Now, among the reasons that I'm not in favor of this bill is, number one, the potential for accidental discharge or misuse of firearms at parties where large numbers of students are gathered, or at student gatherings where alcohol and drugs are being consumed. Also, the potential for firearms being used as a means to settle disputes between or among students is prevalent, or could be. And also, there is that possibility that campus police officers responding to a situation involving an active shooter may not be able to distinguish between the shooter and others with firearms. And when I brought that up yesterday, the response was, well, if they're properly trained, they should not have that issue. Well, I have spoke to law enforcement people that I know personally, and this is exactly what they cited. So for this and among other reasons, I really am urging people to think about this, and maybe this is not such a good idea, and to please vote against this bill. Thank you.
Representative Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Powell.
Representative Bobby Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, yesterday there was a lot of discussion with regard to mental illness and with regard to students on campus being able to have guns at the age of 21. The issue that I have is, when you think about mental illness, a lot of the people who have mental illnesses, they're not diagnosed, or they're diagnosed between the ages of 21 and 25. At least half the cases are found, especially with bipolar disorder, these people are diagnosed between the ages of those young ages. So when somebody's not diagnosed and they've gone through and they've got their concealed carry permit, it's well and fine because it's completely and totally legal. We don't know they have mental illness. And those are the times when they have a lot of pressure. I know I've been in college, and it's those times that people become stressed out. So as we continue to iterate points, let's think about that as we move forward. And the other thing is, allow the college presidents to make the decision. If we want to push campus carry, that's fine, but just let's make it so that the campuses have discretion to determine what they want on their campus. Members, with that said, I would urge you to vote against this bill. Thank you.
Representative Richardson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Dudley.
Representative Dudley, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, I don't remember the date, but we saw some newscast that said there was a shooting on campus at FSU. Well, our son was attending FSU at the time. He is presently. And I can tell you all that there was some very anxious moments until we heard from our son, Devin, that what had happened on campus, that this person in the library had gone off and shot some people. He ended up getting shot and killed. Apparently, he suffered from mental illness. Whenever the subject of gun violence is raised, gun rights advocates always point to mental health as the root cause. They say that in order to correct the problem, we should be focusing on mental health rather than gun control. Florida is doing neither. We currently rank 49th in mental health funding. Our mental hospitals are underfunded, understaffed, and dangerous. Our Baker Act law acts as a mere Band-Aid, and it is in need of serious reform. Meanwhile, as we blatantly ignore the mental health of our residents, we continue to inject more and more guns into our society. Folks, this is a recipe for disaster. On university campus, where the prevalence of many mental health conditions is greater, the threat is particularly grim. The most effective way to keep our students safe is with well-trained, well-equipped campus police forces. At FSU, which recently experienced an active shooter incident, it was campus police who protected students and prevented the loss of innocent lives. Had some armed Good Samaritan attempted to intervene, an even greater tragedy might have occurred. I stand with Florida's university presidents, campus police departments, and student government associations in opposition to this bill and ask that you do the same. Thank you.
Representative Richardson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Clark Reed.
Representative Clark Reed, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I cannot support this bill. The mere fact that the colleges and university presidents are not for this, I can't in good conscience support it. We have police on campus, and they are hired and trained to protect the college campus. The bill I filed contained more education for those seeking concealed weapon permits. This bill does not contain any further education for those applying for a concealed weapons permit. I cannot support this bill, Representative Steube. Sorry.
Representative Richardson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the remainder of our time in this segment.
Leader Young, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Smith.
Representative Smith, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, imagine you're 21 years old and you're in college. You're probably working on a bachelor's degree and you're somebody who's focused on the future. Matter of fact, you're concerned about your personal safety. So you go and you apply for a concealed weapons permit. You get fingerprinted. You get a background check. How many young people nowadays can even pass one of those? And then, of course, you take a course. Also that someday you may be able to protect your very life. Now, we have seen a continued rise of concealed carry permits, and yet no rise in accidental discharge. No rise in people getting the weapons when they shouldn't get them. This fear-mongering of allowing a mature adult to make a mature decision has to stop. If you are 21 and over and you take aggressive steps, not only should you get a concealed carry permit, I want you standing next to me when you have it. I want to make sure that the people in my community, when we send them off to college, when they make the right decision, that they have their constitutional right to defend themselves. And God bless, I also hope that they're defending not only themselves, but your sons and daughters when they go to college. We've been told over and over about the Wild West, over and over about the accidental shootings or the accidental discharge, and yet no evidence of that happening. When did the Second Amendment and responsible, mature adults become a danger on campus instead of becoming exactly what we want our students to be? These students are taking aggressive, proactive steps, and they should be given the right to carry on campus. Thank you.
Leader Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Combee.
Representative Combee, you're recognized in the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It won't surprise any of you all to hear me say that I am a gun enthusiast. I don't think anybody will be shocked by that. So guns have always been a part of my life, believe it or not. And we grew up bird hunting, deer hunting. So from a hunting standpoint, I was exposed to firearms from birth. My dad also was a police officer with the Lakeland Police Department for a number of years, so I had that law enforcement exposure and was around folks that a lot of other officers that would get together, and so they were frequently taking target practice out at our place because we had some property out in the woods, so I had exposure through that. My father-in-law was a longtime officer with the Polk County Sheriff's Department, a captain there for many, many years. So it's just always been a part of my life. So it's not something that I get uptight about, needless to say. But I'm looking at this campus carry idea and looking at the University of Florida, the size of the campus. The University of Florida is 2,000 acres. Florida State University is 1,391 acres. University of South Florida is 1,913 acres. And the University of Central Florida is 1,878 acres. These are small cities in every way. In fact, they're bigger than a lot of towns in our state. They are, and obviously, campus police can't be on every corner. Campus police can't protect our kids 24/7, every minute of every day. The old saying, and I like it, and you all have heard it, when somebody asks, why do you carry a gun? Because a police officer's too heavy. Think about it. I mean, that's why people do this. They do it to protect themselves. They do it for personal safety. But to have a clear and thorough discussion of concealed carry license in Florida, you need to think about the current law. The fact is, permit holders are members of every community in Florida. Floridians who have a concealed carry license can carry their firearm at their local grocery store, their local bank, their local restaurant, and numerous other local places that share with you. I will promise you, I will assure you, I will guarantee you that all the students from Florida State University, all the students from the University of Florida, all the students from the University of Central Florida and the University of South Florida, they go to the banks. They go to the banks just like the rest of us. They go to Publix just like the rest of us. Do you feel unsafe when you're in Publix? Walmart or your bank, do you think they feel unsafe? No, I don't think they think twice about it. There's no doubt that when you're in close proximity to one of Florida's 1.4 million legally carrying firearm owners every day, all of us are, whether you're aware of it, whether you acknowledge it or think about it or not. I ask you, members, why are Floridians' inherent right to self-defense stripped because we walk on a college campus? Would you feel safe? This is a great question. Would you feel safe if someone posted a sign on your home announcing it was a gun-free zone? A big sign on your house, this is a gun-free zone. You wouldn't stand for it for 1 minute. Nobody in this room would. I urge you to support this good bill by Representative Steube.
Leader Young, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Sullivan.
Representative Sullivan, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the midst of this debate, members, it's important to reiterate a few of the facts. One of which is that you're only able to carry on campus with this bill if you have a concealed weapons permit, of which you can only get if you're of 21 years of age and have taken an extensive safety course. I have many reasons for supporting this bill. However, if I had to choose just one, it would be because it empowers women to defend themselves. 1 out of every 5 women on college campus are sexually assaulted. This is completely unacceptable and must change. As Henry Ford once said, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. It's time to do something different, to deter attackers, and that's empowering women to be able to defend themselves on a college campus. As Representative Rehwinkel Vasilinda is a prime example of a woman who was able to protect herself from being sexually assaulted because she was able to carry a concealed weapon. This bill won't put an end to sexual assault on college campuses, but I do believe it will make a difference. And members, I ask you to join me in being part of that difference by supporting this bill.
Leader Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Renner.
Representative Renner, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is really about the idea that if you have a right, if you carry a concealed weapons permit, do you lose your right to defense by pursuing a higher education? The debate on this bill has been a lot about things that this bill doesn't do. It's been suggested that we're going to somehow arm college kids, but this bill, if it were passed tomorrow, would not add one additional concealed weapons permit holder to the roles that Representative Combee talked about. You'd still have to go through the same requirements. The requirements haven't been relaxed or loosened in any way, shape, or form. It's been suggested that somehow we're going to start arming 18-year-old kids, but we wouldn't be arming 18-year-old kids or 19-year-old kids or 20-year-old kids. You'd still have to be 21 years of age, as others have described, pass a background check, take a course, basically be a responsible adult to exercise your Second Amendment rights and carry concealed. All that this bill would do is simply allow you to extend your right of self-defense onto college campuses. And so, in summary, it really is about that, is do I lose my right of self-defense simply by wanting to pursue a higher education? This bill resolves that question in favor of the Second Amendment, in favor of self-defense, and I thank Representative Steube for bringing it.
Leader Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the remainder of our time in this segment.
Right before we do that, take a quick pause just for some recognitions. Chev Jones, you have a recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the East Gallery, we have commissioners from the city of West Park that's in the East Gallery, but also among the commissioners that's there, a person who's known me for 32 years, who's the mayor of West Park, is here, and that's my dad, Mayor Eric Jones, who's over in the East Gallery. Stand up, Dad, so they can see you. And along with him is Commissioner Brian Johnson, Commissioner Dorsett, Commissioner Judakis, and Commissioner Riga Peaches Mack, who are all here, and City Manager Ajibola Balagan.
Welcome to the floor of the House. Whip Boyd, I think you have a recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And very briefly, members in the East Gallery, we have from Representative Steube in my community, Manatee County, the FFA students, a good group of fine young men and women and their leaders up here. Welcome to the Florida House.
Welcome to the floor of the House. Members, we're going back into structured debate. Representative Richardson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Torres.
Representative Torres, you're recognized.
Gracias. Make no mistake, carrying a concealed firearm onto a campus endangers our students, teachers, or professors. And it would add a cost to the college or universities to add security. With all the recent events on campus, we should not expose our children to this danger of someone carrying a loaded firearm. So please, I ask you vote no on this bill.
Representative Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Rader.
Representative Rader, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess, members, with the rise of cable TV news, we're going to be starting to hear more bills about illegal immigration, as we just heard, and guns, because it rises. A lot of people want to hear about it on they serve good ratings. This is a bad bill. And I shake thinking that my kids are going to be going, hopefully, to college campuses, knowing that friends of theirs will not be, they'll be studying with, going to classes with, and enjoying the nighttime probably activities as well, as we all do in college, with kids who have firearms that they don't know about. And you know what? When I was 18, 19, 20, 21, your hormones are raging. Things are being done at night. And to shudder to think what's going to happen on the college campuses when you're drinking a lot, it's a serious topic. And guns are going to be discharged. It's going to be very sad to see when that happens at first on the college campuses. Not only that, I kind of shudder to think when some kids meet their college professors, need that grade. The more guns we have on campuses, the more things that could possibly happen just scare me tremendously. I wish this bill was more dealing with mental illness and dealing with mental illness issues with people who have guns or people with the access to guns, and putting more activities in what we can do to stop young men and women who are on our college campuses that we've read about who have had these gun incidents. That's what we should be really looking at, not arming the college campuses, as we've heard that there's not one college that is for this bill, but we should be working with them to trying to reduce gun violence, not increasing guns on the college campus. With that, I'll be voting down on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Fullwood.
Representative Fullwood, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I wasn't going to say much on this bill, but I do want to make a point that I think is very interesting. So we represent this. We're in this democracy, and we know it's not a true democracy. It's a representative democracy, right? And the folks that we're sent here to represent our constituents, I would imagine if you poll most of them, and I'm sure somebody's going to throw out some stats saying that the majority of the people may agree to it. But what about our college presidents? The fact that not one college president agrees with this isn't relevant to those of you that support the bill. The fact that our police chiefs on campuses who deal with these students every single day, they don't support the bill. These are trained professionals. We're talking about, trained professionals. When you get a gun, you got to go to training. What about the folks that have been in law enforcement for years, 20, 30, 40 years in some cases, saying, no, we don't agree with this? How do we ignore those people? Is it because a lobbying group has more power than those folks? Think about what we're saying. We're saying that the college presidents don't matter. We're saying that the police chiefs don't matter. We're saying that the faculty doesn't matter, that the students don't matter. The students who are saying, no, we don't want guns on campus, they don't matter. Think about it. And you know what this really is? This is a guns on public campus bill, because we know that the private schools will opt out. Anyone think that the private schools won't opt out? They will. So this is a guns on public campus bill. Let's just be real about this, folks. Thank you.
Good point. Representative Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Geller.
Representative Geller, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We spent a long time on this yesterday, and I don't want us to have to spend a long time on this today, because I think everybody pretty well knows where they stand on it. So just a few quick comments on it. Some of us think guns are dangerous. Some of us think guns are dangerous in the hands of the wrong people. And we believe that, unfortunately, the wrong people keep getting a hold of them. I think that as citizens, we have a right. It may not be one of those spelled out in the Constitution, but there are a lot of rights we found in our Constitution that are within the penumbra, the shadow of what other rights create. And I think we have rights just as much as I believe that there are people who want to have firearms and possess them and use them, And there's an amendment that speaks clearly to that. We can argue about what that amendment means, but it's clear that it's there. But I think we have a right also as citizens, if we think that it's dangerous to be around these firearms, we have a right to have some places where there won't be firearms. You know, under the First Amendment, there's a lot of balancing of constitutional rights, where my right to free speech may impinge on your right to freedom of association. And we have to balance these constitutional rights. And I don't see anything in our Constitution that says that the Second Amendment trumps all the other amendments. And I would say to you that I think we have a right to have some places where we can go that those of us who don't want to be around firearms can also be in a firearm-free zone, and nobody who wants to have their firearms for protection has to come in those places. I'm not sure that college campuses fall quite into that category, because there are special reasons why college campuses should be free of them from everybody. And that's why, as we've heard, uniformly the presidents, the campus police departments, the student governments, the faculty, why they all oppose this. I guess maybe they're just all wrong, and in this room we have the repository of all wisdom. But I happen not to be one who thinks that. So I'd suggest to you that maybe, just maybe, some of those folks are right. And definitely that some of us have the right to be free of being surrounded by firearms, as much as those of you who want to have them for your protection have the right to have them. And we need to find some way to balance each other's rights, to be respectful of each other, and to recognize that people of good intention and good faith can disagree. I think our college campuses should not be subject to this, and I urge you to vote against this bill. Thank you.
Representative Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Jacobs.
Representative Jacobs, you're recognized in the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish that Representative Combee was out here, because I would say, maybe he can hear me, that I have a quote. Is he there? Oh, there he is.
He's here.
I have a quote wall, and one of the quotes I have on there is one of his. So, Representative Combee, you are now going to be on there twice, because police officers are a bit heavy to carry around. And I think it's an important point that he made, even though it was made in jest, and that is because this law says if you're on college campus and you are a woman and you are worried about your safety, or perhaps you are looking at the stats that look at rape and you want to carry a gun, good for you if you're over 21. But if you're under 21, then you don't have that gun. And you don't have that safety. Now, I'm not advocating that more women under 21 should be carrying guns. What I would say is to ask all of you, most of the guys in the room, I could say, lift your hands, and you probably have somebody in your life, your female companion, that's younger than you. And if you look across our college campuses, most of these women are with a guy that's older than them. And when they think about self-defense and they're under 21, guess what? They don't get to carry a gun like the guy does. I would also point out that those young men who are under 21 who are in a dorm where one of their roommates can hold a gun because he's over 21, carrying around a police officer for that younger man is also not realistic, because he doesn't have a gun while his roommate does. So when there is an argument taking place in a dorm and these things can happen, what do you think goes on when one pulls up the gun and shows it to the other? That kind of machismo is alive and well in our campuses because it's full of young people. Those are the kinds of things that are agitated and aggravated by having a gun. I too, Representative Combee, like you, grew up with guns. I grew up with parents that had guns in the home. I shot guns, and lots of them when I was young, both for hunting purpose and for recreation. And both my daughter and son-in-law are sheriff's deputies. Guns have been a part of my life since I was very young as well. But I know that being young and having parents and knowing the difference between the way that you use a gun responsibly and those that are using it on a college campus, there is a big difference between those two. I would ask you all to really think about our kids, to think about our young women and our young men who are under 21 and understand that the rules of this new law are going to hurt our families, hurt our kids, and I encourage you to vote no. Thank you.
Representative Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will yield back the remainder of our time in this segment. Thank you.
Leader Young, you're recognized for the majority's second segment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Eagle.
Representative Eagle, you're recognized in the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, on November 20th, 2014, an assailant walked onto the campus of Florida State University and opened fire, injuring 3 people before being shot and killed by police. Representative Dudley mentioned this and mentioned that his own son was on campus at the time, and I can't imagine the fear and panic that was going through his mind. This has become all too often, as has been reported in our nation, that these shootings have been happening in our campuses of higher education, and it's a tragedy, and it is something that needs to be addressed. It's been so common that almost a year later, on October 2nd, 2015, an assailant walked on the campus of an Oregon community college and opened fire, killing 9 people and injuring 9 others before being shot and killed by police. Now, there are 3 similarities that I want to point out between these 2 incidents. First, both campuses are classified as gun-free zones, which means that the carrying of a firearm is illegal, whether or not you have a permit. Second, both assailants did not possess a permit to carry, which means it was illegal for them to carry no matter what. And third, at least one victim in each case was a properly trained veteran who was not carrying at the time because it was against the law to do so. Allow me to read a very brief excerpt from a news article that day. Forget the 26-year-old Zero who murdered 9 innocents on Thursday morning. The one to remember is a 30-year-old Chris Mintz, the student and Army vet who was shot at least 5 times while charging straight at the gunman in an effort to save others. Mintz did so on the 6th birthday of his son. "It's my son's birthday," he was heard saying as he lay wounded. "It's my son's birthday." Now, Chris survived that, fortunately, but what's we need to point out here is the injustice that's been served. Chris followed the law that day. He's a properly trained veteran who did not carry a weapon on a campus that day because it's against the law to do so. The assailant carried illegally and shot him 5 times, killing 9 and wounding 8 others. That is an injustice that we need to fix here in the state of Florida. We invite students on our campuses, strip them of their right to defend themselves, and assure them that they are safe when we cannot guarantee their safety. Well, shame on us. We strip them of their rights to defend themselves, and we cannot guarantee their safety. Gun-free zones are not free from guns at all. They are free from the guns carried by law-abiding citizens, but they are not free from the guns carried by criminals. Now, we've talked a lot about the stats about those who have a concealed weapons permit. Again, they're 21 and older. It's illegal to drink alcohol while having a gun, even if you are a concealed weapons permit holder. 1 in 15 Floridians is a concealed weapons permit holder. That means 8 people in this room, statistically speaking, have a concealed weapons permit. We don't know who they are. I put money on Neil Combee. But the fact is, there's 1 in 15 people everywhere you go in the state of Florida that carries a gun, and you don't know who they are. They're in your supermarket. They're on the streets. They're everywhere except on our college campuses, and our college campuses are less safe because of that. They account for just 0.0002% of gun crimes in our state, and yet we are stripping them of the ability to protect themselves and others when they come onto our college campuses. That is an injustice that we have created, and it's an injustice that we need to solve. Stop stripping law-abiding citizens like Chris Mintz, trained veterans, from the ability to defend themselves. Stop stripping them of the right, their God-given Second Amendment right, to protect themselves and others. We need to fix this, and that's what this bill will do. I encourage you to vote for it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Plakin.
Representative Plakin, you're recognized in the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to get a little bit personal here when I talk about this bill. When I first ran for office in 2007, even then this issue was around, it was in the media a lot, and to be honest, I came down slightly on the side of the opponents of this bill. You could have called me a firearms on campus denier at that time. However, Then I was elected the next year and served for 4 years, and from time to time this issue would bubble up, and I would always feel uncomfortable when it would come up, and even sometimes trying to avoid it. But each time as I was confronted with it and started to explore the facts, I slowly became more sympathetic to the arguments in favor of this bill. Then 2 years ago, on February 21st, 2014, everything changed for me. I was back in the private sector at my office, and I got a text message from my daughter, Jeannie. Remember her? She sang America the Beautiful in this chamber earlier this year. Here's the text message exchange between my daughter, Jeannie, and I on that day. 12:25 p.m. Daddy, I'm in a code red at school. I'm so scared. I tried to call her. I can't talk, Dad. The whole school is on lockdown. I'm in my classroom, all the lights are turned off, and we're all huddled. My friend texted me that a bunch of cops are speeding to the school, and everyone is screaming in the cafeteria. These are about 4 or 5 texts. I texted her back, I'm headed there and I'm praying. I sped there, breaking the speed limit, I must admit, probably by a lot. There was a shooting, Daddy. I'm so scared. But you can't come here. You won't be allowed anywhere near the campus. I will be coming there to get my hug. Daddy, I'm scared. I can't stop crying. I responded, you'll be okay. Law enforcement is on the scene. I am going to get my hug. I said to her on text, these are the moments we must trust in the Lord. She responds, I know. Daddy, my phone has 15% battery left. I'm here. So I got to the school. I entered a scene like we've seen on TV so many times. Hundreds of parents lined up against the chain link fence, can't get in, dozens of emergency vehicles. I counted 4 or 5 helicopters flying above the school. That day, everyone believed, and the news was reporting, that there was a shooter loose at that school and our sons and daughters were locked inside this gun-free zone with a gunman. I'll never forget that day, and it will shape every single vote that I take on issues like this. Again, fortunately, there was no shooter, but for 34 minutes on that day, I lived the life of a parent that believed that there was a shooter locked in with my daughter. 10 months later, I was elected back to this House. I now sit on both the Criminal Justice Subcommittee and the full Judicial Committee. So I've heard this 4 times between last session and this session, and I can honestly tell you, each time I hear the facts presented by both sides in this, I become more convinced that this is the right thing to do to protect our students. Now my daughter Jeannie is a sophomore at UCF, our largest university. So I'm going to be clearly voting yes on this bill, and I want to thank Representative Steube for his passion and conviction in trying to do the right thing for our students. He obviously believes in it, and through his efforts and all that's happened, I've come to believe in this very, very strongly. If, God forbid, the unthinkable would actually happen at UCF or any of our other schools, I like the idea that this policy would be in place so that the students and faculty, if ever faced with such a terrible situation, would at least have a fighting chance against those that would choose to do evil. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Young.
Wow. Okay. I yield the floor to Representative Fant, and I challenge you to top that.
Yeah, good luck, Representative Fant. You're recognized, Representative Fant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Fant cannot top that. Representative Plakin, thank you for bringing your heartfelt personal story to us. I would like to acknowledge the opinions of the university presidents and the law enforcement upon the campuses who generally are opposed to this bill. These are difficult jobs. We should listen to them carefully and weigh them considerably. And I believe in this process we have done that. With that said, I also believe that whether the administrators and the law enforcement on campus like or don't like this bill, the fact is that in many instances, college campuses can pose a grave danger to our lives and to our students' lives. And we cannot change that. The bad guys have guns. They're not going to give them away, and they're going to go where they can do harm. They will hurt us when they can, and unfortunately, college campuses appear to be one of those places where this is occurring. I regret that, but that is the status quo. I think it is reasonable for concealed permit holders to be allowed to have the privilege of being on campus to defend themselves if they so choose in that respect. I do not think it's too much to ask. Someday we may say that college campuses are safer. I'd like to think it's because the bad guys know they can't go there anymore and take advantage of us and hurt our children and hurt ourselves. I want to thank Representative Steube for bringing this bill to us, and I encourage you to vote yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Van Zant.
Representative Van Zant, you're recognized in the debate.
Speaker, in May, Texas joined 9 states that allow permitted concealed handguns on college campuses. Those other states include Colorado, Idaho, Kansas, Michigan, Mississippi, Oregon, Utah, Wisconsin, and those public universities in Pennsylvania outside the Penn State system that authorize concealed carry on campus. Additionally, 3 states allow permit holders to keep their guns in their cars on campus. They include Florida, Kentucky, and North Carolina. These states have not witnessed any mass exodus of professors or students, and Florida has not witnessed any mass exodus of professors or students, nor have these schools had an increase in accidental shootings or self-inflicted wounds because of any permits to allow guns on campus by qualified permit holders. Indeed, when I attended the University of Florida, I, along with many of my fellow students and teachers, all kept our guns in dorm rooms, in our vehicles, both on and off campus. And when we had time, we went hunting together. There was never any problem, Mr. Speaker. And by the way, that was before 1987, when weapon concealment became regulated and preempted to our state government in Florida. So, many of us had our guns on campus then. And I submit to you that we need to allow guns on campus now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Fitzenhagen.
Representative Fitzenhagen, you're recognized in the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. I have repeatedly expressed my support both inside and outside of this chamber for Second Amendment rights. So I was really saddened when I found myself in a state of consternation over this campus carry bill. I asked myself over and over again, is this the right thing to do? I spoke with students, I spoke to parents, I spoke with university presidents. But still, I vacillated on a daily basis based on the image of weapons being mishandled with potentially deadly consequences. These weapons would be on otherwise idyllic university campuses filled with bright, eager students embarking on their adult lives in what I've considered an impermeable sphere of safety, youthful innocence, and academic pursuit. To be sure, I think Representative Clark-Reed makes a very good point about having consistent education for our permits, and Representative Rader also makes a very good point about mental illness concerns. Yet, I will be voting up on this bill today. Not because I've changed my mind or my view on the Second Amendment, but rather because I have mournfully relinquished the premise that there remains any public, safe, idyllic haven for our students and faculty left in Florida or the United States. We must accept the sad reality that the only way to protect law-abiding citizens is the full and complete exercise of our Second Amendment rights.
Leader Young.
I'm quicker than the mic guy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We yield back the remainder of our time in this segment.
Representative Richardson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Kerner.
Representative Kerner, DK.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've had the fortunate opportunity to evaluate and vet this bill through every committee of reference, I think, for the last 2 years. And so, out of deference and respect to the bill sponsor, I'm going to keep my debate very short, and also out of respect to other debaters in the minority caucus who have covered most of these issues very thoroughly, I will leave it very briefly. I've spent 8 years of my life on a college campus, and I'm very proud of our institutions of higher education here in the state of Florida. For those of you that didn't go to a state school or haven't spent a significant amount of time, I would encourage you to spend some time on our college campuses. They are really the treasures of our state, and they have a very proud heritage as well. My issue with the bill, and I trust and I know that the bill sponsor's intent is pure, and in his evaluation it's the right answer, but for me, it frightens me. It frightens me on a level that I haven't really felt with other legislation that I've dealt with in this chamber. I really refuse to believe that the policy answer, that the legislative answer that we can offer to the state of Florida to a culture of sexual assault, mental health, and other issues on our college campuses is to arm our students. I think as lawmakers, we ought to have the humility to be deferential to those stakeholders that live and work on college campuses on a daily basis. I have never seen such unified opposition to a bill before, from the chiefs of police of the various state universities to the several thousands of professors and faculty members and staff members that work on these college campuses, to the students that have come out in mass at committee hearings, that have organized their student government organizations, from UF to FSU to FIU to FAU, all throughout this state, universally are in opposition to this bill. Please have the humility to be deferential on these issues to those folks that will have to deal with the results of this bill on a daily basis. I would humbly ask that you do not vote for this bill. Thank you.
Representative Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative B. Watson.
Representative B. Watson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of this chamber. I have had the opportunity to speak to many parents, faculty, staff, and I've had the opportunity to speak with students, and I've had the chance to talk to some parents. Overwhelmingly, they reject this kind of legislation. The cry that I hear from each of them is very simple. Books and guns don't mix. It's very clear that they're concerned about their children going off to college as they try to increase their education and become members of this society, and through their learning and the skills that they will acquire while they are getting further education. But they recognize the fact that in order to carry a gun, a concealed weapon, you must be at least 21 years of age. But while you're on campus and they send their little ones off at 17 and 18-year-old, they're unable to carry a gun to defend themselves. So there we have, for at least 2-3 years, there may be some people who are not able to protect themselves. Most of them are willing to respect the Second Amendment, and so do I. But I think when we have an level playing field, that we should be responsible of that we should do what is best for the majority, which is not to have open carry on our school campuses. I say to you today that it is important for us to realize our campus police are not really trained to be able to discern when there's some kind of altercation on campuses. And we sit up there and we have multiple people pointing guns in a circle firing squad manner. How do they determine who is the perpetrator? Well, it's been suggested in this chamber today that they have the ability to make that discernment. I tell you, I think not. I tell you that when you have someone that is a perpetrator in a group, and they're asking everyone in that group to place their guns down, I can assure you, no one wants to put their gun down first. So we now have the standoff. I say to you today, we need to do the responsible thing and protect every student at the school. And to protect every student at the school, we need to say books and guns don't mix and vote down on this bill. We come to this chamber each and every year to make laws that will protect and improve the economy and as well as the safety and the welfare of the citizens of this great state of Florida. But when we do that, by allowing some of our vulnerable citizens to be at a disadvantage, and having guns on campus certainly put the majority of the state schools students at a disadvantage, because they most likely will not be old enough to even carry a gun. So I say to you today, let's do the responsible thing. Let's protect the Second Amendment for all. But I tell you, it's not going to be on campuses. It is not the place we start, and I say to you, it shouldn't be the place we stop. Please remember, books and guns don't mix.
Representative Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the floor to Representative Roussan.
Representative Roussan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Open carry, campus carry, two different things, and I'll try to keep my remarks distinct to campus carry. But it's all about guns, firearms, dangerous instruments. And we've heard a lot of debate on both sides of the aisle. We've heard touching stories, real-life examples of where a parent had anxiety over a child's safety away from home. And all of those things touch me. But on October 9th, a fraternity fight broke out in a northern Arizona University parking lot. One of the participants ran to his car, grabbed his gun, opened fire, killing one and injuring three others. The shooter was an avid gun enthusiast. On August 26th, a heated argument in a Texas Southern University parking lot turned deadly when one of the individuals killed one person and wounded a bystander. On January 30th, a fight erupted at an Eastern Florida State College parking lot. One of the participants grabbed a gun and injured one of his attackers. All three men involved in the incident claimed they were acting in self-defense. On January 22nd, an argument described as idiocy and stupidity escalated into a fight on the Lone Star College campus. One of the men pulled a gun and injured the other combatant and also wounded a nearby maintenance worker. Are these going to be commonplace? Will we become numb to guns on campuses and fights that break out and lives that are taken? That's what I fear. And, you know, at one point in a delegation meeting when the newspaper the morning after the Oregon Community College shooting was raised and the college president was challenged to join and change position on this, it upset me because of what happened the night before. The emotionality of what happened, the fatality of what happened, the finality of a shooter on a college campus. And I said, you know, I wasn't going to support that bill, but now I'm going to support it. Maybe if we had had 1,000 more guns on that college campus, maybe 5 less lives would have gotten killed. And matter of fact, I wanted to file an amendment to the bill an amendment that would include a rent-a-gun provision, so that if a student or faculty member wanted to feel safe and couldn't afford to buy a 357, they could rent one from the college campus on that day. And wouldn't that be a great revenue stream for our starved colleges and universities? But the problem with the amendment was that it just might pass. That's where common sense showed up. I think of depression. I think of anxiety over grades. I think of immaturity and incidents where when does a person being assaulted that usually starts out as consensual and becomes non-consensual have time to grab a gun and fend off the attacker? We haven't heard screaming by faculty, by professors, by students, except in opposition. And we've created an inequity by passing this bill. Private colleges and religious institutions, are they oases of freedom because they got God and they don't have gun? The greatest threat on our college campus is binge drinking. The greatest threat on our college campuses is hazing. The greatest threat on our college campuses is substance abuse and not safety, where guns are the solution. I'm sorry, but since when does the great state of Florida use Texas and Illinois and California as examples and models of excellence in public safety on college campuses? Friends, I appeal to you in the words of Representative Kerner when he talked about humility. I've never owned a gun, don't feel the need for one, and have walked up inside dope houses and stood on street corners with gangbangers who were packing, and I didn't have a gun. And I'm standing here today because I was armed with something else, which is what we should arm our children with when they leave home and go to college. So members, I implore you today that this doesn't pass the gut check test. Now, I don't know about the SAT and the ACTs and the LSAT. I didn't do too well on those exams. But I know about the gut check. And it's something that's born in us, something that's learned in us through time. So with all due respect, please think of your gut and whether or not by passing this legislation, we are truly creating an island of safety by allowing more guns on our college campuses. Thank you.
Representative Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the remainder of the time in this segment to the floor.
Leader Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Chairman Baxley.
Representative Baxley, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My, what drama. Folks, the campuses are out of control. Everybody's drunk and they're on drugs and it's all dangerous. What hysteria? What hysteria? Please, a voice of reason. Let me give you a flash. Announcement. Ocala. The mayor has decided to suspend gun rights in the city of Ocala. No, we don't like guns. They're okay. But we just want to be safe in our town. So we're just going to suspend your constitutional right to own or have a firearm or protect yourself or your family. Now, friends, the mayor would never do that in Ocala, because he'd be fired before afternoon. The city hall would be full of people saying, we will protect our families. But now you can go right up the street, about 45 minutes, and not a town of 30,000, a community of 80,000 people, one of our universities. Guess what? A constitutional provision that you can protect yourself and your family. We call a lot of stuff rights around here. This is something that's actually in the Constitution. It says you have that right. And it shall not be infringed. Folks, that's infringement when you lock out and say where you live and where you work and where you study, you're not allowed to have a Second Amendment right here. You have no right to protect yourself from harm or others. Matter of fact, we insist that you be totally defenseless. And I'll tell you something about gun-free zones. They don't exist. Only in our minds. Gun-free zones do not exist. Get over your paradigm. In your well-intentioned effort to provide them, you're missing something. Criminals don't care what your rules are. People who go to kill and destroy and even to die there, they don't care what your rules are. All you're doing is inhibiting reasonable adults, not 18-year-olds, not 19-year-olds, not 21-year-olds. And look, we don't need everybody to have a firearm. We need those people who take seriously the responsibility of protecting themselves and others from harm to be empowered. My son's a deputy sheriff. He said, Dad, you have got to get a permit. We cannot be there. We will write the report. There is no gun-free zone. The wrong people have them, and the people that take serious. And look, these permits, this is very well thought out. This is a very good bill. Only those people who have been cleared by background, who are 21 years old or older, and you're only talking like 1 in 20. This changes the environment. For God's sake, let people have a chance to defend themselves. Vote for this very well-reasoned, very good bill that will allow us to be safer.
Leader Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Chair Workman.
Chair Workman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Leader. This debate, in my opinion, is not about guns on university campuses. I think that's just the board game that we're playing. I think this debate is between those that believe the Second Amendment, that a Second Amendment misjustice needs to be undone in this state, and those that believe the Second Amendment is outdated or those liberties should be limited. I've heard we should listen to university officials and the police chiefs that have their paychecks signed by those same university officials, and I reject their objections. In most cases, when I spoke with those same liberal leaders of higher ed, what was clear is that what they really want is gun control. No more, no less, gun control, on or off campus. That's what they want. This battle is a farce. It's not about student safety. It's about, do we want to allow this state to continue to control people's liberties and take their constitutional rights away, or do we want to restore their Second Amendment rights? A lot of people debated today about allowing concealed weapons on campuses would create a safer campus. I'm not sure if that's true or not. But I do know, because the facts support it, that it will not make them less safe. But I'm not here to talk about safety. Instead, I want to expose this debate for what it is. One side wanting gun control, and the other wanting to return Second Amendment rights to the citizens of Florida. So I want you to stand with me as I stand with the Constitution of the state, of this country. I stand with personal liberties and freedoms, and I stand with what is all good and great about this land. Please vote yes today. Thank you.
Leader Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Grant.
Representative Grant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I feel like this is an emotional issue that probably goes without saying. My view on this as a graduate of Auburn University is a little bit jaded because I think it was a prerequisite for entry. But at the end of the day, members, understand that no matter what vote you take today, there is a risk of danger. The question you have to answer as a member of this body is which risk are you prepared to accept? Representative Roussan, who I have a ton of respect for, says that we ought to have the gut check. Here's what I know. That these people who walk into gun-free zones are a lot of things. They're terrorists, they're evil, but they are almost certainly cowards. And ask yourself if a college student should have to deal with that situation because we tell these cowards, don't worry about the gun check. See, if you sit here on this bill today and you believe that the gun is the defense mechanism, you've missed the entire point. The threat of a gun is the defense mechanism. So when you have the gut check, ask yourself whose gut we care more about. And if these cowards know that they can come to what was called an island for safety in the gun control utopia, I'd ask you whether it's an island for safety or a magnet for mass shootings. And I'd ask you to consider whether it is actually a gun that is a threat or the knowledge from these terrible, terrible people that they can no longer walk into an environment where law-abiding citizens are not allowed to carry, and they're able to amass the kill count thereafter. So when we cut through all the emotion, members, it's a pretty simple thing. There is a risk of danger. Guns are dangerous. But I would suggest to you that we ought to have the humility to understand the risk that is involved and the courage to be willing to do what is right to say that no child on a college campus in this state should be forced to surrender their right to protect themselves. And members, I encourage you to vote for a very well-reasoned and good bill.
Leader Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Ingolia.
Representative Ingolia, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we've heard a lot of debate here, and we've heard a lot about campus law enforcement being against this bill. So let me be very clear. While I respect them and the job that they do, I really don't care what they think when it comes to this bill. What I do care about is my stepdaughter, Jade, who is a freshman at UCF, and her fundamental right to protect herself, a right that is guaranteed to her and to all of us by our Constitution. Those rights should not be diminished or infringed just because she or somebody else wants to get a degree and is physically on a college campus. And we should not continue to create sterile environments that give people with bad intentions an advantage over others. Now, I have heard opponents of the bill here today, even one saying that this is all about a special interest. And I agree, it is about one special interest, our children and their right to protect themselves. I've heard that they said that they should call campus police. They should take self-defense classes. They should call 911. But to me, this choice on this bill is very, very simple. It's easy. And to put this choice into context, let me phrase it with a question. Think about this for a moment and let this sink in. Suppose your daughter is on her way home coming from a late night study session, and she's walking home on her way to a dormitory, and some big thug, some big guy, much bigger than her, drags her behind a building close to where she's dorming, has a mask over her head, pulls her down to the ground, has a gun or a knife up against her chin, and is getting ready to sexually assault her. And that is your daughter. Now ask yourself, at that moment in time, would you rather have your daughter have a phone in her hand getting ready to dial 911 or a Smith & Wesson? If you'd rather have your daughter having a phone in her hand, then by all means vote against this bill. If you would rather have the right of your daughter to protect herself on a college campus, then vote with this good bill. I urge every member of this chamber to vote up on this bill. Thank you.
Leader Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield to Representative Rehwinkel Vasilinda.
Representative Rehwinkel Vasilinda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I also want to thank the sponsor of this bill for graciously allowing me to be on this bill, because I believe very strongly in this bill. I was a college student, and there was an attempted sexual assault on me that I stopped with the use of my firearm. I come by this... Thank you. It's not easy for me to talk about that because it was a very scary thing. But I come by this naturally in that my dad trained me how to use a firearm, and I was very fortunate in that. But I am also a college professor. I've been on college campuses for over 30 years, either as a student in law school or as a professor. And I will tell you, I am one person who will feel very much safer if I can carry my concealed weapon on campus. I have a concealed weapons permit. I know what that entails. And I think some of the argument that's been going on in this chamber has completely ignored what it takes to get a concealed weapons permit. It is not for everyone. It is not for people who have felonies. It is not for people who have problems with domestic violence and who have shown that they are violent. It is not for people who have mental illness. It's not for people who have drug or alcohol offenses. It is for law-abiding citizens, and the people that have concealed weapons permits in this state have proven themselves to be very law-abiding. And so I will feel safer with my gun on my person as I go onto campus. And I will tell you that the campuses are not gun-free zones. There are people carrying illegally on our campuses right now. And that's a shame, but that's true. I don't carry on the campus that I teach on because it's illegal, and I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I don't want my right to have a concealed weapons permit taken away from me. But I do want the right to defend myself. And I want the right to defend, if it ever came to that, students in my classroom. And so I urge everyone to vote up on this very good bill and to give people the right to defend themselves when they have to. And I thank you for listening to me.
Leader Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the remainder of our time in this segment.
Members, that concludes our debate. Representative Steube, you're recognized to close on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to all of you that debated this bill today. But especially I would like to thank my prime co-sponsor, Michelle Rehwinkel Vasilinda. Not too often will you see Steube and Rehwinkel Vasilinda on the same bill in this legislature, but it has been a true honor to work with you on this bill. And it's great that Republicans and Democrats can come together for good common sense legislation for Florida, because it's not about party, it's not about politics, it's about what's right for the state of Florida. Members, every day, 1.4 million permit carrier holders in this state carry in restaurants, in shopping plazas, in malls, in parks, all over our state. And there is not this parade of horribles that we have heard from the opposition today occurring in any of those places. In fact, if you actually look at concealed permit holders and you look at the amount of time, and there's been people that have talked about it, that they actually commit crime, concealed license permit holders actually commit crime 6 times less often than certified law enforcement officers. Now think about that for a second. Recently, I had the opportunity to speak at a chamber event. My father, who's a sheriff, was sitting in the event, and he was sitting there, and we were talking about the campus carry bill, and I said, so statistically speaking, I am safer than my father, the sheriff, when it comes to carrying my concealed firearm. 6 times less likely. So think about that for a second. So why would we not want these individuals to have the right to defend themselves? On an annual basis, concealed permit carrier holders violate the law 0.0002% on an annual basis. We have 28 years of data and concealed carry to prove it. I want to tell a quick story because I think this will kind of bring it to home for a lot of members. Recently, we had a Republican caucus a couple weeks ago, and it was over in the Trumbull Center. You guys probably remember it. We went over to Trumbull. As I got out of my truck, I was like, oh, shoot, I'm on a college campus. I have to holster my sidearm. So I put my sidearm in my truck. I walked into Trumbull, and many of you that were there remember the speaker was at the front of the room. And all of our backs, most of you probably didn't think about it, but I imagine the military members that are in here thought about it. All of our backs were to the doors. I thought about it because I like to tend to sit in the back of the room. Every one of the entry and exits were behind all of us as we looked at the speaker. If some terrorist, if some mass shooter decided to walk into that room at that given time and start opening fire on all of us standing in that room, the only thing that we would have been able to do to defend ourselves is guys like me and Artilles to run after the shooter and try to stop him before he killed all of us, while other people try to run in different directions and call for help. I don't want the situations that we've seen in Sandy Hook, in Oregon, at Virginia Tech, at San Bernardino occurring in the state of Florida. And there is no legitimate or factual reason to deny licensed permit holders the opportunity to defend themselves and others. There are many people like myself and other military members who have served admirably and come back and they use the GI Bill to go to school. You know how many members that we have in our military that use the GI Bill to come back to school? I had an attorney in Miami who sent me an email. His daughter is a Marine. She served in combat in Iraq. She's now at FIU University going to school. She has a concealed carry permit. And he wrote to me and said, you know what? I'm scared to death that my daughter, who fought for our country, who is walking to class at night at FIU, does not have the ability to defend herself if, God forbid, somebody tries to attack her or if a terrorist were to walk into her room and start shooting. Nobody can say she doesn't have enough training to be able to respond to that situation. She served in combat, for crying out loud. You know how many people like that there are that are out there that would be willing to sacrifice themselves to protect every one of us and protect themselves if, God forbid, a circumstance like that were to happen. So I ask you for favorable support on this bill. This is not a Republican and Democratic issue. Thank you, Representative Rehwinkel, Vasilinda, for your prime co-sponsorship, and thank you very much for your support.
Question now occurs on final passage of HB 4001. The clerk will unlock the machine and members will proceed to vote. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? Have all members voted? The clerk will lock the machine and announce the vote.
80 yeas, 37 nays, Mr. Speaker.
Show that bill passes. Please read the next bill.